Welcome to More Than Our Story, where we strive to inspire through sharing. I'm Daniel Height, and today I'm joined by Tracey Kerr. Tracey was living her dream life, finishing her PhD, and competing in multiple sports at the World Championship level until in 2005, a serious motor vehicle accident changed everything. Despite immense adversity, her grit and determination and love for her sports brought her back to the activities she loves. Tracey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel.
So as I just mentioned, you were living your dream life. Can you share a little bit about that period and maybe some highlights?
Yeah, prior to 2005, I had been a graduate student for quite a while in kinesiology at Simon Fraser University. I was in the third year of my PhD, writing up my thesis, and had lots of publications with some other co-authors. So that was my primary job. I was also teaching at Simon Fraser University and working as a teaching assistant. And at the same time, I was highly involved in triathlons. So I started triathlons in 1992 at McMaster University during my undergrad. And then when I moved to Vancouver, my friends and I started the Pacific Spirit Triathlon Club, which is one of the largest triathlon clubs in Canada, and it's still going to this day. And we were all training for Ironmans. So I've done 3 Ironmans, and I've competed in both the duathlon world championships and the Ironman world championships in Hawaii. And then life was going really well. I had gotten married and had a daughter. She was 4 years old by that time. We went out for a drive, and unfortunately a car hit us. They ran a light and kind of hit us head on. And I developed a very serious traumatic brain injury, as well as a neck injury and some other problems that over the course of 4 years almost killed me.
Some of the physical, maybe some of the mental and the physical impacts of that accident?
Mm-hmm. So the physical impacts were I had torn my brain in multiple places, and I was no longer able to read or remember words at all. So I couldn't read even my daughter's baby book at that time. So I've gone from publishing journal articles and reading at a graduate level to not being able to read at all. I couldn't remember the definitions of any words, and I had trouble speaking. So whatever I was thinking was not what was coming out of my mouth. I had torn a part of my brain known as Broca's area, which caused expressive Broca's aphasia. As well, another area of my brain that I had torn caused something called ataxia, and I had severe ataxia. So I couldn't stand up without falling to the ground. So I was unable to walk, and I had to use a walker for 2 years, and or the assistance with my husband at the time and daughter holding me up on either side so I wouldn't just fall over to the ground. So I went from being one of the fittest people in Canada to being one of the sickest. And I continued to get sicker over the next 4 years, where I would lose all my fluid in my body and my electrolytes, and I would have to go to the hospital 2 to 3 times a week to have a lot of saline, potassium, magnesium put back into my body, and nobody knew what was happening to me. The other thing is I had a serious neck injury, and I ended up having a 3-level artificial titanium disc replacement in my neck, which is not a common procedure because it was only available in Germany at the time. So I had to wait until it came to Canada to do that. So I lived with extreme severe pain for numerous years.
So how did you cope with that? You know, as you said, you were at the epitome of fitness, and then all of a sudden you're unable to walk and talk. That
Yeah,
must have been devastating.
it was really devastating. And I think what kept me going through all of it was the fact that I had a 4-year-old daughter, and I had to still be a mom to her. There were some really hard parts where she didn't know what was going on. So when I went to speak and things like I would want to say, "Oh, honey, how's your day?" And it would come out yellow, purple Christmas tree. And so she would burst out laughing and stuff. And at first, it really hurt my heart a lot because I just felt I had worked my whole life to get to a certain level academically and in sports, and I had that erased in one day. But then it really became down to, I got lost in the medical system because it's actually not like a TV show where you go into a specialized brain injury hospital here and they diagnose you with everything and you have this giant team. Because I wasn't in a coma, I went to the ER and they're like, oh, you likely have a concussion, go home. If it gets worse, come back. And then I continued to progressively get quite bad that following week. And even the neurologist I saw, she didn't believe that I had aphasia or ataxia. She wasn't, she was given to me by the emergency room, not by a referral. So she wasn't a specialist in brain rehab medicine. So she missed it as well. And luckily, I had a lot of contacts in the medical community who were also Ironman triathletes who were able to get me in for the MRIs and prove that I had these problems. And it was really me self-advocating for myself and fighting for my life that whole time to try and be heard, be seen, and then again, finding out myself how to get treatment. And I had to do speech language therapy for a couple of years to learn how to speak again and how to read again. And then with the ataxia, I had to do balance retraining with physiotherapy for a long time. And then the interesting thing again with my daughter was when she was about 6 years old, I was still using the walker and we were teaching her how to ride a bike. And having been a cyclist, I also competed in cycling during my Ironman years. I just watched this and I was like, I just want to ride a bike with my daughter so bad. And so I had my triathlon bike set up in my bedroom on a wind trainer, on a trainer that was permanent, so I couldn't fall off of it. So I would crawl up on there and I was able to pedal and ride. It was just more, I didn't know if I could ride outside without falling to the ground. And so I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to try, right? Just see how it goes. And so I got my bike out and my husband kind of held me up while I got on the seat and he pushed me. And sure enough, my balance was fine when I was cycling. So I was able to ride a bike, at least with my daughter, very slow speeds. And I couldn't go very far because of my neck injury. And I was like, why can I ride a bike, but I can't walk? And so I knew of this world famous neurologist called Paul Bacchio-Rita at the time, who was doing research in this area. And so I sent him a message and I explained my story. And he said, because I was moving so much faster on the bike and my arms were wide on the handlebars, it compensated for my brain not being able to allow me to walk, where I was moving more slowly. So it was quite interesting because my first degree was in neuroscience at McMaster University, and I had done some brain research there. So I really understood the brain. So I was able to do a little bit of cycling. I tried to go into the pool and swim, but it was really my neck injury at the time that I could only do 100 meters without being in too much pain. So it was very, very hard on my family to see me like that, and to, especially my ex-husband, because he was used to a woman who, for example, he did 100-mile running races. And so I had paced him at Western States and Angeles Crest and crewed for him. And so to have someone at elite level fitness and now to be at, less than my daughter's level of fitness as a 4-year-old. So it was just a lot of fighting for my life. Like I didn't have a moment to feel sorry for myself because I was so set on I was going to do everything humanly possible to get better. And then with the central diabetes insipidus, I got progressively worse over the next 4 years. And I had seen, multiple specialists, nephrology and endocrinology. And I knew enough about the brain that I figured out that I must have injured my pituitary gland and hypothalamus. And that's why I was losing my water, all my water every day, and my fluids and electrolytes. And I went to a specialist and I told him this. And I said, I think I have this condition called central diabetes insipidus. And he looked at me and said, that's impossible because it only happens to people in a coma. It doesn't happen to people who are walking around. And I said, well, I have a very serious brain injury. I have aphasia and ataxia. I did get dystonia, which is a neuromuscular condition. I said, but, I'm losing all my electrolytes. And I would show him my labs and he wouldn't believe me. And I forced him in 2009 to send me to an endocrinologist. And again, I went in and I saw this woman. And by that point, I had gone from 115 pounds of solid muscle and I was about 89 pounds. And I was having to use a wheelchair in 2009 because I couldn't breathe and I was so weak from severe dehydration and electrolyte loss. And we went and saw this woman and I explained my situation. And I said, you know, I think I have central diabetes insipidus. Like, here's all my labs. And she just said, excuse me for a minute. And she left the room and she came back in and she said, I don't know what you have. Maybe it's something I've never seen before or something incredibly rare. But I suggest that you go and plan your funeral because you're not going to live more than a month. And at that point, I was horrified. I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm telling you, like, I was a brain scientist. I am an academic. Like, I know that you haven't seen this, but I'm telling you, this is what it is. And she said, sorry, I can't help you. And yeah, it was pretty bad. So I went home and I did plan my funeral. And we did our last wish trip, which was I wanted to take my husband and daughter to Hawaii because I'd been there for Ironman and I just loved Hawaii and I knew they would love it. So we got on a plane, went to Hawaii for a week, had an incredible vacation despite my medical challenges at that time. I watched them surf and have a wonderful time. And when I got back, I thought, you know, I have enough knowledge because by then I could speak. By 2009, I had overcome my Broca's aphasia. Sometimes I was still having glitches, but overall I could speak, I could read again, and I could do research like Googling on the internet. And honest to God, if Google hadn't existed, I wouldn't have been able to figure out every single problem I had because I was able to put my symptoms in and it would come back with things. So I thought there must be somebody in the world who's seen this before. And so I looked for a central diabetes insipidus researcher, and there happened to be a specialist in Montreal named Dr. Daniel Bichette. So I called him and I said, this is what's happening to me. And he said, send over all your labs. And I sent everything over because I kept getting my blood work done every couple of weeks when I was in the hospital. And he said, I do believe that you have this. And I happen to be coming to Vancouver this weekend for the National Endocrine Conference, and I'm going to present your case and I'm going to make them treat you. And so he flew in and he presented my case at the conference, and he made Vancouver Coastal Health, which is our health authority here, organize and run the gold standard test, which is a water deprivation test. And then the nephrologist who had been following me called me and he was like, what have you done? Like, how you're making this happen? And I said, look, I'm just trying to save my life, right? I'd love to see my daughter grow up. And so I ended up having the test 2 weeks later, and it came back positive that I had central diabetes insipidus. And the nephrologist called me in a week after that with the results, and I went into his office, and he said, I know the test is positive, but I'm having a hard time believing it. And I just said, you know, I'm not going to hold you accountable for anything that happens for me starting the treatment. I said, but I strongly believe this will save my life. And it really is just a bottle of nose spray, and you spray it up one nostril and you hold it there, and it goes into your brain and it replaces the vasopressin in your brain that my pituitary gland wasn't making. And so he pushed the nose spray across the table. I put it up my nose and sprayed it. And within 30 seconds, it felt like I had dried up sea sponge in my brain. You know, those kind you see when you're a kid that are yellow? My brain just filled up with fluid, and I'd had an ice pick headache right through my brain to the center of my brain from the day of the accident for 4 years. And it went away instantly once I had one dose of that medication. And it took about 3 years for me to gain back my weight and my strength and stabilize my electrolytes. So it's been an incredible journey. And what I found out later was most people, as the nephrologist said, they get this disease or disorder because they have a brain tumor or they've had brain surgery that damaged their pituitary. And they're usually in comas or unconscious. So they get something called hypernatremia, which is high sodium levels in their blood. But because I could walk around and I felt like I was dying of thirst all the time. So I was drinking water, it caused very low blood sodium in my blood. So it was the opposite. And they hadn't seen somebody usually with my series of a head injury not be in a coma. And so it was just a new case and a landmark case where you can actually have opposite blood work to what you expect. And you could be walking around as, you know, well, not initially I couldn't, but be upright and not in a coma. And it turns out there's only between 50 and 250 people in Canada that have permanent central diabetes insipidus. Usually the people in comas in the hospital, they recover and the brain starts making their own vasopressin again and they don't need lifelong treatment. But I'm one of the people that needs lifelong treatment.
That's really a incredible story that highlights the importance of self-advocacy in the
Yeah,
medical system,
yeah.
and also the wild coincidence that you happen to have that knowledge at hand.
Oh, yeah. If I hadn't been a researcher for years and knew about the brain and everything, uh, and known about the body and medical stuff, I would not have been able to figure this out, and I likely would have died.
So you've said it's possible to overcome challenges by having the right mindset, staying positive and focused. How soon after you found your cure, well, I'll call it
Right.
that
Yeah.
cure,
Yeah.
how soon after that moment did you set your mind on returning to sport?
Well, I'd always been determined to return to sport. It was just a matter of getting well enough to do that. Um, so once I was able to stabilize my health, I also needed a fair amount of surgeries from the injuries I sustained in the accident. So I'd had 14 surgeries by this point, just on different points of the body because of injuries. And so it was really in 2016, after a jaw procedure that I had, because I damaged my TMJ joints in the surgery, in the accident rather, that the pain had gotten down low enough that I started walk running. And so I just started building up very slowly. At first, I started just kind of running on a bath mat in my bathroom on the floor, like jogging very slowly on it to see if my neck and my head pain would tolerate it. And then over that, I started doing run walking with my dog, and I was able to build up to a 5 kilometer distance. And I was able to start hiking with a friend of mine. Like I was very grateful and lucky that I have a core group of triathlon friends that I've had for 30 years, and they all stayed with me through all of this. And so they wanted to start helping me train again. And so in August 2000, and so in 2016, I worked on running. It was still a little bit hard to bike until I had my cervical disc replacements. I ended up, there was this really cool race called Mount Marathon in Alaska. It's the oldest running race in Alaska and in America. And it's more like a big hike with, then you run back down the other side of the mountain. And I'd been able to do a lot of hiking. So I thought I will write them a letter and see if I can come to Alaska and do this event. And they graciously wrote back and said, we would love to have you come. So I ended up flying to Alaska for a weekend and participating in Mount Marathon. That was the first event I did in August, I believe, 2017. No, it was actually, sorry, the 4th of July, 2017. And so that was my start back to sport. And then I was able to build my endurance up. And a girl I had met at Mount Marathon, she was doing a 100-mile running race in the fall, in September that year. And she lived in Utah. And she said, why don't you come out to Utah and help me crew for my race a little bit and pace me? So I went and paced 10 kilometers of her race for her. And then I went to the Grand Canyon and did a 22-mile crossing of the Grand Canyon.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
it's just determination.
so you've been very vocal about how the triathlon community helped you overcome. Um, I can relate to that personally too, as a way to, it focuses my energy and gives me something to direct it to.
Yeah.
Um, Do you still have any adverse long-term impacts from the accident that linger?
Yeah, I do have chronic fatigue. I still have dystonia, so I'm on lifelong. I take medicine and I do get Botox injections for the dystonia. I have to take I still have problems with the central diabetes insipidus in terms of sometimes I still get low electrolytes and may need to go into the hospital and deal with those. It's not that frequent anymore, which is nice. I do get a lot of, my brain has never gotten back to that strong academic level or my energy levels that I had before. So I get a very tired brain from thinking too much or trying to do too much in a day. So I have to rest a lot more than I used to. I find that very hard and frustrating, um, but I accept it. It's better than the alternative for sure. So before I used to be able to do, 11 hours of exercise or races of that distance. And now, I can do a couple of hours here or there, but it's not an everyday thing. And I never know when I wake up in the morning if I'm getting out of bed that day and going to be productive, or if I just have to lay on the couch all day and just rest.
So you now work as a sports dietitian, if I'm correct?
Yeah, I do. So I was a clinical even after the PhD stuff, I did prior to the accident, I did also certify as a clinical and sport dietitian. So I do casual, like private consults with athletes, and they're either triathletes or ultra runners, or marathon runners, 10K runners, things like that, that I work with and help them through their nutrition to achieve their goals in sport.
I'm assuming that's kind of a natural progression too, considering your education, your own medical journey, and your self-advocacy.
Yeah, it is. It works very nicely with all of my other skills. So it's something I really love to do. I do a lot of volunteering in the triathlon and sport community and the running community here in Vancouver. And I just love helping athletes achieve their goals.
So have you ever considered doing an autobiography? I know you've done sports psychology training. That would be an interesting angle.
Yeah. What I've actually been working on this last week is um, I'm writing a journal article for an online open AI called Curious. And what it is, it's my story as a case study so that I can share it with the world so that people who've been in car accidents and have brain injuries and patients and doctors can look at this. They can just Google in their symptoms and my case study will come up, and hopefully it will help people get quicker treatment so they don't have to go through what happened to me.
So what did your accident teach you about yourself and your resolve to overcome hard things?
What it taught me about myself is I can accomplish anything I set my mind to. That even though I had the brain injury, I still have the knowledge in there and the skills that I had acquired through, 14 years of university to be able to find the way, right? So find the answers, even if other people say it's not possible. I have the confidence to believe in myself strongly that I have enough knowledge and skills to be able to figure it out, even and to stand up to the entire medical profession. So that, is a big thing. A lot of people would be afraid to do that, but I wasn't afraid to do that. And I'm
So
just
when
resilient.
resilience,
Yes.
when is Rare Disease Day? What is it and why is it so important to you?
Yes. So actually, Rare Disease Day, I don't know the actual date, but it was last month. And it's run and organized by the National Organization for Rare Diseases. And they list on their site, NORD, they list all of the rare diseases in the world that exist. And I'm very grateful that they did a story on me explaining all of because the dystonia I had is also a rare problem. The aphasia, the ataxia, the central diabetes, these are all rare medical things that aren't very common. For most people, we might get one of those things. It's very rare for somebody to acquire all of those things from a brain injury. And it just highlights the fact that, you know, I can look completely normal to someone, or somebody might see me running and go, there's nothing wrong with that person. And you can still have hidden chronic illnesses that people are unaware of that, you know, have a large impact on your life. And so NORD spreads awareness around the world and in communities to help people learn about these rare diseases, because a lot of people are thought of as invisible because they're home and they're sick and they don't become a part of society when they're chronic, like seriously ill with a rare medical complication. And some people you can see their rare diseases, but people like me, it's an invisible illness.
So what would you say to somebody going through a very challenging time in their life?
Persevere, don't quit, don't give up. Empower yourself with as much knowledge as possible about every symptom you have and why you have it. Try and find answers and solutions and ways to cope mentally as well. And a lot of that is positive self-talk or acceptance. Like, I had the hardest time with acceptance that I was forever going to be less than the person I'd worked my life to become. And now it's about, I'm going to do the best I can today with what I'm able to do today. We'll see how tomorrow is, but I accept that it is this way now. Whereas before, I used to fight accepting it. And that was a harder psychological journey on myself.
So Tracey, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today. You've shown that with the right mindset, resilience, and refusal to give up, anything's achievable. I want to wish you good luck in everything you do, and hopefully your upcoming races.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a race next weekend, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Best of luck.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.